Welcome back, Wanderers, to the Corner of Story and Game. This time, we are diving back into the lenses of game design, but this time with the multi-talented Najmah Salam. A marketing alchemist with over a decade of experience across a multitude of industries, Naj brings a unique blend of creativity and technical expertise to the conversation. And as a narrative designer and producer for Small Lone Studios, she infuses her passion for gaming and storytelling into every project. Join me in extending a warm welcome to Naj as we explore 4 more lenses from the art of game design and discover how they shape her marketing and narrative design approach. Naj, thanks for joining me.
Hi, nice to be here. I am vibrating with excitement to be here. I won't lie.
Oh, thanks, Naj. You were on my list of people I had to talk to because you're brilliant. From everything I've seen in class and conversations, you have one heck of a brain, so I'd like to pick it.
Ooh, yes, it is open for you to pick.
Excellent. So we're sitting down today to tackle 4 more of the lenses from the art of game design. This is a little series I'm running, and then I did the math the other day, and I realized it's going to run well into the fall. So I've bit off a bit more than I can chew, but here we go.
Here we go.
So today we are going to tackle the lens of curiosity, the lens of passion. Hang on, let me check my notes. The lens of risk mitigation and the lens of the client, which are all interesting choices and make perfect sense if you know Naj. So this will be fun. But before we dig into the lenses, I like to start with a little bit of a grounding of who you are, how you fell in love with the gaming world and writing and games, and then kind of your story of how you got to where you are today and what you're up to today. So take us through that.
Sure, it's definitely a bit of a winding road. So top things is I'm originally Singaporean, but I definitely feel like a global citizen because I've moved around a lot. I grew up in Japan and then in Melbourne, Australia, and then moved back to Singapore and then went back to Melbourne for university. And then now I'm in the UK. I have been for 9 years in beautiful Salisbury. So yeah, just having diverse perspectives is just kind of like the way my life has been. And it sort of manifests itself in my work and what I do and my curiosity, which is one of the lenses that we're going to talk about today. I feel like I was late to gaming. So I think because growing up, my parents were very much like concerned with studies, and both my maternal grandparents were teachers, so that just kind of trickled down. So I had a very academic upbringing, and I don't think I played my first console game until I was like in my 20s when I was in university, and that game was Fallout New Vegas, which, Gerald, as you know, I have a very soft spot in my heart for. Yeah. And it was really interesting because before, my experience of games were like watching friends play, like Counter-Strike or Call of Duty, and I was just like, that doesn't interest me at all. But when I played Fallout New Vegas, it was a completely different experience. And my love affair with gaming has grown and grown and grown from there.
Nice. So you worked in marketing. Marketing is your day job, email marketing, digital marketing, all that.
Yeah.
But you're also branching into narrative design, working with Small Lone Studios. Can you just quickly tell me who is Small Lone Studios? What is that?
What is this entity? Yes, Small Lone Studio is I guess for now, we call it a game jam studio that was formed from a bunch of the narrative department alumni. I think it was literally Andrea who was like, hey, there's a game jam happening. Who wants to join? And I think 15 people collectively went, yay.
Nice.
And now there's probably like 50 plus people in the Discord server. But we first started with making a visual novel in 30 days called Santa's Secret, which features an android detective. Very fun. We're currently working on a project which I'm directing, actually. So I wrote the story and I've been directing it, and it will be complete at the end of April. And yeah, another 31-day project, which is pretty wild. I'm looking forward to our longer projects in future. But yeah, it's, normally when people think about game jams, they think about, maybe it's like a small group of people, like 3-4 people, just kind of crunching out this this, cool prototype, this fun thing. And for us, we're definitely working on a game and it's fun. But I think the difference is that there's a lot of people bringing in industry level standard practices. So the feedback that we've gotten is that our organization and our documentation is pretty incredible. We're using things like Notion and Miro and, other things that kind of you don't get to really use for any other reason outside of like doing it for a project like this.
Yeah.
And we're learning a lot as a team as well. So yeah, that's what Small Loan Studio is. My hope is that it is a place where people can learn those skills and take them to whichever job they go to next.
Wow. That sounds so cool. It's like a skill incubator for people who are wanting to get into the industry so they can bake in those things that they've learned. That's very cool.
Truly, and have a pretty like good quality project at the end of it that they can be proud of and show off as well.
Yeah. Santa Seeker is fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes.
And like just so people know what to watch for it, can we say the name of the project you're working on right now?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the Ouroboros Express. Yeah, and it takes place on a mystery luxury train
that always runs on time.
Yeah, almost always. Yeah, that's the real mystery. It runs on time.
So before we move into the lenses, one other question I typically like to ask about the history of people who work in games is, did you also play board games or tabletop games growing up? Because sometimes that's an influence as well.
Yeah, I'm actually an ex-Scrabble champion. This is going to give you some insight into Naj as a teenager. I used to play Scrabble competitively when I was a teenager. That was a big part of my like high school experience, secondary school experience. And of course, I've played, I never played like D&D or those kinds of games before, but I certainly remember a lot of my time like, playing, like Scrabble is a big part of it for sure. And I think one thing that is really interesting about Scrabble, which has kind of bled into the types of games that I like today, is that it's half skill and half chance. And I really love games that are like a good mix of both of those things.
Smart. As for D&D, you may not have played yet, but we got to change that. We got to get you to a table.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I just realized Scrabble, I said half luck, half chance, it's half luck, half skill. But there we go. Yes, half luck, half skill. Yeah. But yeah, D&D for sure. I played a one shot actually with friends, and we raised money for charity. It was just an excuse for me to hang out with my friends, to be honest with you. I mean, like raising money for charity was really nice. On top of that as well, we raised like $400 for Girls Who Code. We smashed our we smashed our target, which was really nice, and got a great one shot out of it as well. So I'm obsessed. I would love to play more.
Cool. All right, we'll make that happen.
Yeah.
All right, let's dig into the lenses. So first up is the lens of curiosity. So for the listeners who are unfamiliar with these lenses, can you explain what this particular lens entails, and then how does it influence your approach? Yeah,
sure. So, the way that this lens is set up, which I really love, is that it's not about the goals, not just about the goals the game sets up. It's also posing the question of like, why does the player actually want to achieve those goals? What's making them move forwards? And so, how does it influence my approach? I think I'm naturally a curious person. Like I have a sense of wonder about the world around me. It's just who I am. Like I hoard loads of random trivia, and it pushes out important information like, bank pins and whatnot, but it's fine. So how does it influence my approach? I think for me, this comes from my analytical mind. So I, in my day job as a marketer, I do a lot of reporting. I do a lot of analytics and insight, and it actually ties beautifully into this, because to do reporting well, please don't fall asleep, listeners. Truly, this is interesting. No, to do data reporting well, you need to start with a question, and I think any project starts really with a question. So, in data reporting, it could be like, okay, how, did we achieve our goal of earning this amount of money. That's day job stuff for me. But for creative projects, it's like, I wonder if I could tell a story about grief in a way that is compelling to someone to play through. And so for me, this lens of curiosity is so important, because I think truly every bit of art that has moved me has always started with a question, a hypothesis.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah.
That's clever. Well, I mean, your diverse background, as you touched on, that really suggests you have a curiosity burning inside, like a passion for learning. So connecting the dots there is pretty easy. I'm curious, how do you tap into that raw sense of curiosity? How do you use that to fuel innovation and inside of game design?
Yeah. The thing about curiosity is that the more you feed it, the bigger it grows for me. People who are not curious don't want to feed it, and they don't learn anything new, and therefore don't ask more questions. So it's a real virtuous cycle, like starting with a little seed of curiosity and seeing where it takes you. So I think because I used to do this thing, I still do it actually, where I have a loose thing at the end of the year. So my birthday is on 31st of December. Naturally, I feel like it makes me feel pretty introspective at the end of the year, much more so than like people who don't have their birthdays on 31st of December. And I started doing this thing where I would challenge myself to learn a new skill every year. And it wouldn't be like, physics, obviously. It would be things like, I want to try out needle felting. I want to try out a little bit of basic coding, or I want to try out this and that. So I've actually accumulated a bunch of random skills. But the more of these skills I learn, the more connected they are to me. And I think, feeding that curiosity has only made it grow. So, I mean, how can other people replicate it? It's like, again, like what I would say is start with a question, because that question will lead to even more questions.
Yeah. I used to bounce around from thing to thing. I've learned photography, videography, audio design, graphic design. And I used to be like, how do I connect these? I felt so bad because I was the whole Rolling Stone syndrome. A Rolling Stone gathers no moss crap. I felt that way for a really long time. And even that's even something that I struggle with now, this feeling that I don't specialize in anything. I'm a generalist. Yeah, me too. But I think it's a really beautiful thing to be a multi-classer, because you develop such empathy and like I said, such wonder and such appreciation for a broad amount of things. When I watch movies, I'm a real film nerd. Like I edit, and I took film in school, and I love watching like behind the scenes stuff as well. Like I own a couple of like books, and when I watch a film, of course there's the artistic value of the film and how it moves me and all that kind of stuff. But I also have such an appreciation for, my gosh, the cinematography is great. This actor is doing something really interesting with the scene. And, again, that is a really great experience to have, because having that appreciation for things it feels good to me. It doesn't feel like I can't enjoy this thing. Yeah. We're just built different.
Truly.
The epiphany for me, though, one day was I was feeling really bad about doing all these different things. And then I realized they're all connected to storytelling. They're all different aspects or features or ways too. So I was like, well, maybe I am kind of focused. And that was good enough for me. Yeah.
Sometimes like the words good enough are like really powerful. That's something I think about a lot as well. As someone who used to struggle with perfectionism, good enough can be powerful.
Yeah. Darn right.
Yeah.
Just to riff off the lens of curiosity, because I have a marketing person and I haven't had another marketing person since like Gavin Brown way back in season 1. So the lens of curiosity actually kind of applies, because when you start a marketing project, when you take on a new client or start a campaign or a branding process, The beginning of that process always starts with what is the client problem and who is the target audience? Two very powerful questions that drive everything that comes after it.
Yes.
So knowing that and learning that, is that something you apply to narrative design? Like you've answered the question, yes, you lead from questions, but those marketing questions where it's who is the target audience and how do they talk and how do I connect with them on an emotional level? And what is the problem I'm solving for, which you kind of touched on. Do those inform your process?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was the thing that came surprisingly easy to me when we were going through the narrative department, taking the classes, this idea that you're not writing in a silo, you are writing for someone. And that's something that you just practice anyway in marketing, in copywriting. It's the best practice to imagine a target audience, a persona. You actually, if you're doing your due diligence as a marketer, you're spending a lot of time building this fictional persona and building out the story of who this person is. And bringing that practice to game writing came really easily to me. I was really surprised, actually. So, yeah, I used to think a lot about the difference between art and design because, we are just inundated with stuff all the time, and, art really moves and they can overlap. But sometimes the difference between art and design is that design is specifically created for a particular purpose and a particular person. And sometimes art doesn't really have that same focus to it. It doesn't have to. It can be more exploratory in that way. And for game writing and narrative design, the clue is in the name. There is a much more structure to it than I initially believed and really I fell into when I started doing that work. So yeah, absolutely. There's those two questions really count for quite a lot when working on game writing.
Yeah, that's so cool. I desperately want to just go for an hour talking about the avatar process and identifying target audience. And
oh my goodness, yeah.
I took Margot Chase's masterclass way back in the day, years and years ago. If you've ever looked at Margot Chase, she was an incredible designer and she introduced the avatar process to us. And but that might have to be another podcast because we got lenses to tackle.
We got lenses. That might be, we'll do a whole other podcast.
We'll circle back into marketing and avatar process later.
Yeah.
All right, next lens of passion. So passion is often cited as the driving force behind creative endeavors in general, but very specifically to game design. So I guess to lead us off, how does the lens of passion manifest in your work?
Passion for me is a double-edged sword. As I get older, the thing that I realize about passion is that it only gets you so far. It is a driving force. It is a catalyst, but it's not necessarily the fuel that keeps you going all of the time. And I think anyone who's done any creative work will know what I'm talking about. You start with a very cool idea. You're very excited about it. But then at some point you start to think, does this suck or do I suck? Or is it both? That's when the passion stops. So yes, passion is really important and it's great and it's beautiful. It is a fire, but sometimes that fire goes out midway through a project. So Jesse Shell, I haven't memorized this, by the way. I've got notes on my desktop. I'm cheating. but Jesse Shell, he says, he asks questions like, am I filled with blinding passion about how great this game will be? If I've lost the passion, can I find it again? When I hit upon that question, that is a question that not enough people ask themselves, in any creative field, not just game writing. And for me, it is grow up, follow through, trust the process. You started this project. There was clearly something that you identified with. Just keep going. So yeah, that was kind of my spicy take about the lens of passion. It's great, but it only takes you so far.
Yeah. That whole idea of starting a project because you're firing passion, but then you run out. That's for creatives. Yes, you said it bang on. We all know this. So we develop tools and techniques to carry us through. For instance, my way of making sure I write every single day of the year is I have a big glass jar up on a shelf over there. And every day that I write, I get to throw a new dice in it. So it's an excuse for me to add to my thousands and thousands of dice. But by the end of the year, I got this huge candy jar full of multicolored dice that I just love. So there's tools and techniques like that? Do you have ways to keep yourself going when the passion goes, like actual hard techniques, tools?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's the carrot and the stick, right? So we've talked about your carrot. Yeah, I come up with like different carrots. Of course, sometimes it's just, I just need to, this is like corporate marketing day job me as well. I'm just like, I just need to time box 3 hours and then I can do whatever I like after that. There's real productivity things, which I know some people in the creative community feel a bit like, ew, corporate stuff, but they're there and they work for a reason. And so I think they're definitely worth making use of. So, things like time boxing and then giving yourself a reward after. Absolutely. There's also things I think about, like this is where self-awareness comes in, which is the hardest thing in the world. And self-awareness about what motivates you and what drives you specifically as a person. For me, I love when people recognize that I've done something good. And I know that about myself. And so one thing that I say to myself is like, well, no one's going to tell me that this is good or even bad if I don't share it, or if I complete and don't share it, right? So I need to complete this damn thing. So there's that as well. There's this element of self-awareness about, okay, like, dig deep. What is it that drives you and, gives you that little dopamine rush?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I was working in the corporate world, and I don't miss the boardrooms, I had to take a lot of courses, go through programs and read books. And there was a couple that were very neuro-linguistic programming based, and they talked about how people are either intrinsic or they either need an internal or they need an external.
We must have taken the same thing. Yeah.
And then they also either need a push or a pull. So there's either, like you say, carrot or stick people, and then it's either internal or external. So it's one of those 4 quadrants.
Yeah. And, the likelihood is that you hit a little bit of all 4 as well. Yeah. I mean, the danger is certainly what I've seen is that people who are fairly new in their careers, just starting out, haven't developed that resiliency just yet. A lot of it is extrinsic, which can be very dangerous because then you are relying upon external factors to guide what you do, how you feel about yourself. That's not great. And I think the most important thing that game writers can do, anybody in the game, like creative community can do, is build up your intrinsic motivators, because when shit gets tough, you can still rely on that intrinsic, driving force to keep pushing you forward.
So, I mean, it's good to have other people say, hey, I love what you did, but you've got to be able to say to yourself, hey, I love what I did.
Exactly. If you cannot reconcile the two, it almost doesn't matter how many people are fawning over you if you cannot reconcile that within yourself.
Yeah. And on the same topic, really quick before we move on, I've heard you mention the frog and I've heard you mention the checklist manifesto.
Yes.
So we're on the same page when it comes to just tackling shit and getting it done.
Absolutely. Eat the frog. That is my favorite thing to say and do. Get the hardest thing done. Actually, it's interesting, this project that we're doing, and one thing I've gotten quite a lot of feedback on from the writers, but I still stand by it, is that we are writing Act 2 first rather than doing it linearly. So Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. That is something that Susan O'Connor validated, which I'm very glad about. But it's something that we actually did that I implemented before, because my feeling was we need to eat the frog, get the meatiest, chunkiest bit of writing out first, then we top and tail. And so that should give you some indicator of like how my past experience is bleeding into like my game design, game writing stuff now.
Okay, so we're going to move on. So passion, get you going, get you fired up, get you hot, but you need tools to carry you through.
You need to keep fueling the machine for sure.
There you go. All right. The next lens is the lens of risk mitigation. So this is an interesting one. You do wear the producer hat, and as we've just mentioned, you are very much project oriented. It sounds like you probably have some project management training in your past, like I do.
Yeah. Yes.
So risk mitigation, critical part of project management, which is basically video games are a big project management task.
Yeah.
So how does this lens inform your decision-making process, especially when it comes to like navigating uncertainties and challenges and the tricky parts?
Yeah, absolutely. I really wanted to talk about this one because, again, this feels like one of those icky corporate things that creatives really want to push over there and pretend that it's not happening, but it absolutely is. Risk is all around us. It's lurking around the corner. Yeah. So on our first project at Small Loan Studio, I was the project manager / producer. And for me, the way I approached that was always thinking about what is the worst thing that could happen? And because it's such a strange mindset to be in, because like in any other situation, people would be like, are you okay? But it's really helpful when you have that hat on, because then you can start thinking, right, how can we mitigate that? What are the options? So, the way that I approach things, or the keyword I constantly say, and I think people in Smaller Studio probably sick to death of it, is I always say options. What are the options? What are the alternatives? Because, we are working with imperfect information. We're working with incomplete data all of the time. And the best thing you can do is just, hey, life is one big branching narrative. Who'd have thunk? If it doesn't go one way, then it goes another way. So being a great producer / project manager is thinking about, all right, what happens in both of these situations.
Cool. With your experience in narrative and also in marketing, because it's applicable as well when it comes to risk mitigation.
Yeah.
Have you do you have like a couple of anecdotes or examples or situations where your skills in risk management became applicable?
Yeah. I can even talk about one situation where the worst did happen, and then it was like a feeling of like, shit, what happens next? So back when I was a head of marketing at a startup it was an AI assisted product essentially, and it was like incredibly expensive, and only really 2,000 companies in the world would ever use that product or could. So when I was in that position, we had to organize a lot of events, and really it was my reports, the person I'd hired who was overseeing the event, and they'd done the whole thing, and it was beautiful. And us and the salespeople, we were all there. Not a single person turned up. Ooh. So it was I think one person turned up, and they were like a strategic partner of the business or something. And so we were all there, kind of, there was a real funk, there was like a real feeling of like, oh, what do we do? But, anybody with enough resilience should be able to be like, okay, options, alternatives, let's keep moving. Let's not sink into the bog of sadness right now. And I think that's the most important quality that, not just project managers and not just producers, but anyone in with any kind of creative work to do should start thinking like, it's like, okay, so what if the worst does happen? What do I do next? The ability to bounce back is super important as well. So that's how I think about, like, I know it's kind of an unusual story because it didn't mitigate the risk, but it's more about like, what happens when the risk does happen? You also need to think about that too.
Yeah, no, that's a huge part of risk mitigation, is understanding the consequences and how to keep moving forward afterwards. We've all had big things go terribly, terribly wrong. I had a trade show in Texas, and I'm in Alberta, Canada, and I had a $20,000 piece of equipment that had to be on the trade show floor ahead because it was too heavy, and it got stuck at the border, and then it got lost, and like I had 2 weeks of hell. Yeah, and you just roll with it. You just figure out how to keep moving forward, and make phone calls to friends to see if there's other jobs in case you get fired, but you keep going.
You keep going. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the other part as well, right? You cannot, I think there is sometimes a propensity to, put, as they put all your eggs in one basket. And I don't like doing that for myself. I am always about, okay, if this doesn't work out for me, what happens next? And if this doesn't work out for me, what happens next? So it's very, very important skill to have.
Very much so. Mm-hmm. An important way to look at the game development process is to ensure you have an eye on the risk.
Yeah. Actually, before we move on, it's really interesting how that's come up a lot in Small Loan Studio, because I would encourage, by the way, everyone to do a game jam or to, if you're, especially in this strange period before getting into the games industry, but you're like a career changer like me because you learn so many practical skills and apply them. One of the things is that we've done one 30-day project. We're working on our second 31-day project now. And you don't have time and you don't have resource. And there's obviously a lot of cool stuff that you want to do, but you can't do. And risk mitigation, having that lens on is really useful because you then think, okay, if we suddenly slot this into the pipeline, what happens? The risk is that we don't complete this game in time for, so there's a lot of like juggling that has to happen. So incredibly important.
Super valuable lesson to learn too. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Small loan sounds cooler and cooler. I want in now.
Yeah, we would happily have you. Oh my God.
I was talking to Zach because Zach and me did the first masterclass together. We were in the same like cohort, like we talk constantly.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's just joined you guys as well, apparently. So
yes, he's doing some incredible writing. Yeah. He's
a great writer. Yeah, I'm getting serious FOMO.
Okay, we got to get you on. We got to get rid of that FOMO.
if I run D&D for you, will you let me play in your studio?
Yeah, sure. This is people. This is how the deals happen in the game industry.
There you go.
Backhand.
Making the magic.
Oh yeah.
All right. Next lens, last lens, in fact, of our fun conversation. I never want to end. The lens of clients. So we actually kind of touched on this already, but let's dig into it a bit more.
Yeah.
The lens of the client. So in game development, just like in marketing, we're creating something for a client quite often, not always, but very, very often, or for, in the end, a target audience, at least a customer, a player. How do you incorporate this lens into your strategies and design processes?
Yeah, I again, this is where I feel like my diverse marketing background has become a bit of a superpower rather than something that drags me down, which is the ability to create this persona and imagine them when I am creating something for them, because it becomes a lot stronger. Like the output, what you're making becomes a lot stronger because you know who you're creating the thing for, whatever the thing may be. And so, yeah, it plays a big part. For example, again, to bring out Smaller Studio in this project we're working on, it's a visual novel, but I know that I'm someone that doesn't play a lot of visual novels. I've only played 2 or 3. Like, I'm not a big fan of the genre. But there's elements of weird cosmic stuff in there, and it's a little bit more mature in its tone as well. And so I got to thinking about creating this persona, which was someone like me who hasn't played a lot of visual novels, but would be interested in playing this game. And yeah, and I was able to do, like, I did loads of research. Again, this is like, marketing background, superpower, doing loads of mood boarding and doing lots of, finding like reference touch points as well, like specific scenes from movies, which I thought, okay, this is exactly the tone that I'm looking for. So yeah, I think ultimately having this lens of the client, target audience, persona just makes things a lot easier to build and a lot stronger in the long run.
When we build that avatar, what we call it, for marketing stuff, and then we're later developing small pieces of a campaign, just assets, just a flyer or a post or whatever. It's really handy to have that avatar on the wall or somewhere nearby so you can think to yourself, okay, I'm making a post for, Joe Shell, who's from down the road and drives a black pickup truck, and I'm writing a post about his dog for a dog food company. I can connect. Is it the same with when it comes to creating for games? Is it like, I know that Joe's into this kind of thing, so I can make sure that I'm tying into that? Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know that the audience is going to be a little older, like me and above. And I know that these people are going to have, probably have more complex like lives and relationships than certainly the kind of person I was when I was 20, right? So, the writing, when I'm reviewing it, I think about how
the client, the avatar, as it were, would be reading, and will it sound disingenuous, or would it sound very true and very real to their own lives and their experiences? Would it resonate with them immediately? And I have to say, the writers on this project have been absolutely smashing it in that regard.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Part of that research into developing that persona, and this is me curious, just riffing off the side here. Do you research and look up other games that they may play that are similar, or other literature? The reason I ask is when I heard about the Ouroboros, are you familiar with Call of Cthulhu as a tabletop role-playing game?
Yes, I haven't played it, but I'm very aware of it. I do love like spooky horror, eldritch stuff, nice. Much like you. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a mega campaign. There's a big campaign, and I can't remember the name of it now, but it's on the Oriented Express. It's a train adventure.
Oh, incredible.
That's eldritch horror. And I'm just curious. And I'm not telling you to go look it up or let it influence what you're doing. I'm curious. Yeah. Do you intentionally not look for stuff like that so that it doesn't bleed into your work? Or do you go looking for it so that you're informed, this has been done, I need to do it differently?
Yeah, this is where I think my kind of sporadic, like curious mind, works in my favor. And that I don't try and look for likes, but I look for things from a broad spread of media.
Brilliant.
So it could be, because I remember when I was putting together the mood board, like the pitch for the story, it really had things from like TV shows, films, even like bits and pieces of writing, and even, like some shots from a graphic novel that I'd seen as well. Cool. So yeah, I try not to look for lookalikes as much as possible, because I know like it's that thing where like it'll just kind of like settle in your mind and you'll kind of accidentally incorporate it. I think it's more useful to think about specific moments, specific tones, and looking across a wide range of media. Also, it's like if you're making a game and you only look at other games, it becomes really you're kind of repeating a lot of the same tropes. And I really believe that like the world is so big, you can look across so many different areas of creativity.
100%. I was just curious, but that's what I figured. Yeah. I would love to see your mood board sometime too. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it is insane. I would happily share it with you.
So on the same topic of the lens of the client, in order to really tie in and make sure that you're communicating with the client, it's important to collaborate and have that open line of communication with them. Yes. Do you have any strategies? Like how do you, both in marketing and then is it applicable to gaming, how do you develop those relationships and those ties with the client? Is that my door or your door? Hang on a second. Let's pause for a second.
Okay, sure.
I think that was my door.
Okay. You go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
What's up? What did you need? That's okay. What did you need? Sorry about that.
No worries.
I have some sick children that need just a little bit. It's all good. It's all good. Wait, where was I?
The client.
Effective communication and collaboration. So you are about to share some strategies on how to build strong relationships.
Yeah. This is such a great question because it ties in a lot of things about curiosity, passion, risk management, and this lens all in one. And the thing I'm going to talk about is that sometimes, and certainly when you are in a leading position, certainly as a director, I found that sometimes the client are other people within the studio, stakeholders, as we might call them in the corporate world. And that's the other client that you need to think about, because you need to be able to sell your idea. Again, coming from a marketing background, is a bit of a superpower that feels very natural to me. Pitching ideas, selling ideas, getting people excited and passionate about the ideas. For me, and of course, there's always going to be, when you have a bunch of creative types, a bunch of passionate types in one room, sometimes there will be little clashes that happen. Relationship building and people management is actually one of the most surprising soft skills that I found is a huge part of the development process at Small Loan Studios. Certainly, we have 30 people working on this project. It's going to be a big part of it. So I mean, thinking about the client, not in terms of the player, but in terms of other people at the studio, I have a few like top tips and tricks. One is start with curiosity. Actually, Jesse Shell in his book had this really amazing anecdote about how there was a client who, speaking to a game developer, wanted the car, the racing car, to be shinier, which would be a huge issue. They wanted the car that they were looking at in this demo to be more chrome, which was huge problem, would be potentially really expensive, all of this stuff. Now there's three options that any person would probably choose, which is, yes, we can do that. Big problem for budget and pipelines and whatnot. It would be no, and then you can, essentially burn your bridge with that client. Or you can ask them why, which is what the game developer in that anecdote said. And curiosity really is a big part of helping you to develop good relationships with other people. Because when you do have, invariably, we're all different people. We're not always going to agree on stuff. And that's kind of the beauty of working in a studio with other people, right? You have this diverse perspectives. You need to understand and where someone else is coming from. And I would say that is one of the most important touch points for developing good relationships with people, just in general. Because it could be that someone's just having a bad day. Someone is feeling a bit sore about something you said to them, the other day, and you didn't realize. There's so many different reasons that you're not privy to when you have clashes with people. So it's really important that when they do happen, you just ask the right questions. The other thing for me is, and this is my evil marketing hat on, I'm afraid, to convince people of an idea, the best way to do that is to make them think it was their idea in the first place.
Yep.
Yeah. So as a fellow marketer, you know that a lot of this can be done with some clever messaging that is very subtle over time. And, and then just, asking the question about, hey, what do you think about this? Hey, what if we did this? What do you think about that? I'm really kind of helping guide people towards the conclusion. Yeah. So that is absolutely a top tip for me. If you want to convince someone of something, you got to make them think it was their idea in the first place.
There is no overstating the power of buy-in. If you can get somebody, even if you can get somebody to change the color, get them, you say, hey, what color do you want this? And they've added that piece, suddenly it's part of their project and they're in.
It's ownership. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's exactly it. And that comes, actually, it's really interesting as well. Ownership, that's such a great point you've put forward, because at Small Lens Studio, I like to think that we're pretty democratic about the decisions we make as well. Not every decision needs to be made by 30 people. That would be the camel episode of Parks and Rec. but it when it comes to big decisions, and when it comes to workshopping stories, we have a bunch of people in the room and we talk it all out together, and that also feels like it's made us as a team stronger and makes the buy-in a lot stronger on the story as well. So for example, I had a pretty good idea of the characters in the story, but then we've got character experts and they've built on the lore of those characters themselves. I've just kind of been hands off because I wanted them to have ownership, and they've built beautiful lore and backstories. It's made it a lot stronger.
That's so cool. Something, I used to run the creative department at a magazine publisher. So I was responsible for corralling a lot of graphic designers. I used to call it herding cats because
100%. Yeah.
I used to take them to a magazine or to a bookstore, and we used to pick through magazines once a week and we're looking for design, and we're looking for typography, and we're looking for layout ideas and grid layouts and cover designs. But we were also hanging out. And you hear a lot about how good teams in game design play games together. So where I'm going with this is, does the Small Lens Studio team, do you guys clan up and go and play games together? Do you hang out casually at all in some way? Because you're all over the world. So
yeah, I would love to play more games with the team, but we have, I think, a good culture in the Discord. And some people find it overwhelming, but yeah, a lot of us will kind of just yes and each other, and we've got a real meme zone happening. I'll just randomly start threads and being like, hey, here are characters and gifts. It's just like the randomest stuff
That's cool.
like that. But we've kind of gotten to a point where we're making prototypes of what we've written so far. And actually, yesterday, me and our mutual friend Cam, also from the narrative department, we did a bit of voice acting for people on the call of the game. So we're doing fun stuff like that as well.
Wow, cool. That's what I was wondering. Yeah, no, I really want to come hang out with you guys, but that is the lenses, buddy.
Oh my gosh.
That was quick.
About it for another hour.
I know, right? But that brings us to the question that lives at the heart of my little social experiment here. And that question is, and I'm sure you've probably heard me ask it a couple times. Yeah. I personally believe there's a magical space that exists where stories and games, obviously, but also fiction, comic books, performance arts, all these creative endeavors meet, and all these people can just hang out, have something in common. So, in your opinion, what is the magical thread that holds us all together?
Yeah, I think it is a curiosity about the humanistic experience. So I have several years worth, I have 2 diplomas and a bachelor's degree in communications in some form or another. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about communications. One of the things that still stick out to me is the theory of solipsism, which is the only thing that is really known to us as individuals is your own mind, and everything else is just kind of a guess. And I think what entertainment and games, fiction, other forms of entertainment is helping to satisfy that curiosity of what is going on out there outside of my own mind, and really what is going on inside my own mind. I think that's where great games and fiction and entertainment really put up a mirror and also feeds people wanting to know that the answer to that question. I feel like I've developed so much empathy and love and also horror and sympathy, all of these things through playing entertainment games. It might sound a bit silly to other people, but yeah, I feel like all of these stories really speak to helping to answer what is going on out there outside of my own mind.
That's a good answer. I like that. All right. Well, quick fire round. I'm just going to ask you a couple of quick questions just to get to know you a little better, share a little bit of what's happening. Yeah. What are you currently playing? I'm
playing Dead Island 2. Oh. Which is a nice gory time.
That's a darker one. Yeah. What are you currently reading?
Babel. So I'm about a third of the way through this really excellent book by R.F. Kuang, and it really hits me in all the right places. There's that dark academia. There's, code switching. There's linguistics in it. It's been fantastic so far, and I really adore R.F. Kuang's writing. I would heartily recommend it to anybody. Cool.
What's the best advice you've ever received? And this could be life advice or career advice or...
Yeah, I actually cannot remember where I heard this, but it's really stuck with me, which is that with anything in life that is a consequence of the things you do, you have to remember that is half luck and half what you did. And I find it really useful to temper myself. So for example, if anything bad happens that, as a consequence of something that I've done, bad decision making, half of it is really kind of out of my hands and half of it was me. But also it also tempers me on kind of flying too high, gassing myself up too much. Anything good was also kind of half out of my hands. It's a consequence of a random happenstance of things, a butterfly effect, and half of it was me. So it's probably a weird philosophy, but to life. But I find it very useful to temper myself either way.
That's good advice. I like the take on it that it requires luck for the door of opportunity to appear, but it requires hard work and preparation in order to be ready to get through that door. So yeah I like that. You nailed it. All right. If you could host a game session, play a game with any 4 people, living, dead, anytime in history, who would you play with and what would you play? Now, this could be tabletop, board game, role play, or it could be a video game session.
Yeah, it's a bit unusual. It's a mix of people that I find really interesting and admire. First one would be David Bowie. I'm a big David Bowie fan. This ability to reinvent himself and just iconic music and looks and aesthetic is wonderful. Nikola Tesla, he's someone that is really interesting to me. Like I think inventors are just supremely so interesting. I would love to know how his brain works. Susan Kare, I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but she was the iconic graphic designer behind a lot of like the Apple, like the original Apple designs. And we still see a lot of her work now, like the floppy disk as save icon, things like that. And fourth one, because I'm a bit of like a horror and film nerd, I would like to sit down at the same table with Jordan Peele. I really love his work. And I think it's that really interesting thing where he started off as in sketch comedy, and now he's a horror film director. Like I aspire to that level of, evolution in my own career. So that's what I want to find out about from him. Okay. So this motley crew, what would we be playing? I think just like, a nice standard game of D&D, because it reveals, even though you are role playing, it reveals so much about the other people at the table as well. So I would just love to get into a campaign with them.
Right on. I think Jordan Peele would like make you laugh really hard and then freak you out. Like,
oh yes, I would love those moments. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, that's the question. So before I put up the chairs and turn down the fire, first of all, what are you working on that you might want to promote or boost? Obviously, what is anybody up to?
Obviously, me and the rest of the amazing team at Smallwood Studio are working on the Ouroboros Express. It will be live on April 1st. Not a joke. It will be, this is ultimately for a game jam, and my hope is that we can inject even more content into it, but in its first playable form, April 1st.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. And I will have links to that in the show notes. So incredible. That is it. Thank you so much. Before we wander out the door here and I kick you back out into the storm, why don't you have the final word? Give us a little bit of wisdom on your way out.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I would love people to remember, and especially our dear, dear friends in the creative community, probably watching this right now, is have more kindness for yourselves. I know it's very easy for us to, as I was saying earlier, to get to that stage when the passion burns out and think, I suck, this project sucks, everything I've done sucks. Have more kindness for yourselves. Just keep going. I personally want to see more projects from you in the creative community. And I'm speaking to you, Gerald, as well. I want to see more of your stuff. So yeah, just keep going.
It appears the connection to this plane is starting to weaken, so it's best you be on your way. Now, before I lock the doors and head to bed, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to Naj for sharing her expertise and experience with us today. And to you, dear listener, as always, thank you for taking a seat at the table. Until we meet again, remember to keep exploring, creating, and sharing your stories with the world. Stay safe, Wanderer. Your chair will be ready by the fire the next time you stop in the corner of story and game.